Hello everyone, we are back with another session of Bootcamp. Today we are going to cover AWS CDK pipelines and code builds. We have today with us Huma Hanif and Tazia. Do you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to welcome Huma. Varis was the first student who became a teacher. Huma is becoming the second student who is going to become a teacher. The whole idea is with both with Varis and Huma is that we train people not just in development but in presentations and because as everybody knows, confidence is everything, and the only way to gain confidence is by doing it. There's no other way. There's no shortcut. Varis is now about 30% trained, and nobody's training him. He's training himself. You get the feel of it. You pace yourself slowly. Most Pakistanis have a problem that they talk too fast because Urdu is a very fast language. This is one of my professors told me in America. Urdu is a very fast language. English is a slow language. So therefore, when we talk in English, because our mind is working in Urdu, so therefore we are very fast, and you gain confidence as well because there is a double pressure. It's a foreign language as well as the second pressure is technical. It is highly technical things. Huma, why don't you introduce yourself, please, and so that all the students get to know you.
Okay, my brief intro would be simply my name and my education. My education is simply graduation. So my technical background is I've done AI in PIAC and then this bootcamp. All is
Okay.
that I.
Thank you so much. But you are very impressive that you completed your 12 projects and you have now become quite well versed in web development, and now you are learning AWS. What is the Uma, what is the reason behind why do we do CI/CD? What is the objectives? Could you just summarize it? The details we cover by the AWS CI/CD pipeline will be covered by Varis. But why don't you introduce what is the purpose of CI/CD? What are the objectives and so on?
Okay, CI/CD is one of the core of DevOps. And what is DevOps? DevOps is a set of practice which we do in order to build, test, deploy, and automate the entire process without any manual intervention to maximize our productivity and reduce the errors. So that is the whole idea about CI/CD. It's a part of DevOps. So it includes continuous integration and continuous deployment. It also has delivery as well as deployment. Integration includes building your code, testing it, and once all the tests are done, it's ready to deploy. The deployment process are like CD for continuous delivery as well as CD for continuous deployment. The core difference is like in delivery, you have one manual step. After that manual step of approval, it's processed to deployment. But continuous deployment is like start till end, entire process is automated through all types of tests, whether it's UI test, integration test, unit test.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Uma. Wonderful job. Wonderful job. Varis, why don't you take over and
Sure.
go with the ball?
Sure. Let me share my screen. Okay, so basically in the last class, we learned about secret manager, and some Zeeshan taught us how to create and use secrets. And today we're going to learn about pipeline. And pipeline is another AWS service that allows you to implement CI/CD in AWS. Okay, so I've actually made some slides. Let me go through them very quickly. Okay. So as I said, AWS Code Pipeline allows you to implement CI/CD in AWS. Okay. So basically, what is CI/CD? Homa explained it very nicely. She gave us a very good introduction of CI/CD, and I think at this stage, each and every one of us who is listening to this lecture should know what is CI/CD because we have done it thousands of times. But if I have to like wrap it up in few lines, it would be that CI/CD basically automates the building, testing, and deployment phases in your software delivery model. Okay. So like in an ideal CI/CD environment, the developer would only be concerned about pushing the code to the repository, and once they have pushed the code, it would automatically be tested, built, and deployed. Okay, and then we have been doing this since the beginning of this bootcamp. Like, if I can remember, in the beginning we were using Surge for deployment, and in those projects we were using GitHub Actions to implement CI/CD. So if I'm running my website, I would only push my code to the GitHub repository, and it would automatically deploy my website on the Surge. And then later on, we also saw CI/CD with Netlify, which was very, very easy to implement. So Netlify would connect an app with your repository. So whenever you would push something to that connected repository, it would automatically start building your app. Okay, and then later on, in the very end, we also saw a very interesting, a unique kind of CI/CD in Project 12E, where we made virtual lollies. So in that application, we were actually triggering our build and deployment from our main application, not from the commits. Okay, so people who have done Project 12V would understand what I'm talking about. So today we're going to use CI/CD in AWS. You can also do CI/CD in AWS using GitHub Actions, but today we are only going to see how to do it using Code Pipeline, which is AWS's own service. Okay, so I've made these two blue boxes over here. This explains you the difference between the manual deployment that we are doing right now, especially when we're deploying our stack, we're doing it manually. And this is what you do in a CI/CD environment. Okay, so right now what we're doing is, let's say if I'm writing my stack in CDK, what I do is I write my stack, I define my Lambda functions, I make my DynamoDB tables, I save my code, then I push my code to the repository so that I can share it with someone else. And then I write npm run build to build my code, and then I write CDK deploy. So this is the manual process. This is what we're doing right now. Okay. But in CI/CD, what we will do is we will only save our work and then push our code to the repository, and that's it. The npm run build and CDK deploy would run themselves. Okay. So this is what you call CI/CD. You can also add testing over here. Okay. So basically, you can see the steps are pretty much the same, but most of the stuff is automated in CI/CD. You can see over here. Okay. Now, okay. Now, the thing to understand in AWS is that there are basically two different kinds of deployment. Okay, and I think this is where things get a bit confusing, and I think this is why many people could not make 13C. So basically, there are two different kinds of deployment. One is your backend deployment, the deployment of your CDK stack, the code that you write in the CDK project. Okay, and the other is the front end deployment. Okay, so your backend deployment, when you write CDK deploy, your stack gets deployed in the CloudFormation service. Okay, let me repeat this again. When you deploy your backend code, it gets deployed as a stack in the CloudFormation service. Okay, but we saw I think in this step 2 of this repository that when we want to deploy our client side application, like our front end, we save it in the S3 bucket. Okay, so this means that whenever you want to change the something in the backend of your application, you would want to reflect those changes in your stack in the CloudFormation. Okay, and whenever you are changing something in your front end, your build folder would change, and you would want to reflect those changes in the S3 bucket, not in the CloudFormation stack. Okay, so this is the main difference between the two deployments in AWS. Okay, so front end goes in the S3 bucket, your back end goes in the stack in CloudFormation. Let me also actually show you how did we do the front end deployment. So I think, yeah, this is step 2. So you can see first we created a bucket, then we created a CDN.
Varis, could you please increase the font?
Sorry. Yeah. So first we created a bucket, and then we created a CDN, and then we defined in S3 deploy that what do we want to add to the bucket, and that is usually our build or public folder. In this case, we only had one file in the folder. So you deploy your front end in the S3 bucket. Let me also show you the CloudFormation. Where do our stacks go? So this is where your stacks go. This service is responsible for your stacks, and S3 bucket is where your front end goes. So these are my stacks. These are my backend projects. Okay. Okay, moving on. So first of all, I'm going to discuss the deployment of your stack. Then I'm going to discuss this one. I'm going to discuss them one by one. Both of them are pretty similar, and then you will have an idea that how to use them together. Okay. So this is again the summary of the last slide. So this is what we're doing right now. We first write our stack. We write our code. Then we can push it to the GitHub if you want to. And then we open our command prompt and write these commands manually. And once we write them, then it gets deployed to the CloudFormation. Okay. We can see your stack in the CloudFormation console. But what we want to do is don't want to do this manually. We just want to push the code manually, and then npm run build and cd deploy should run automatically, and our code should be deployed automatically to the CloudFormation. This is what we want to do in the backend. Okay. And this autonomous step, is implemented using code pipeline service. Okay. So yeah, so let me start coding. I'm gonna go step by step. So first of all, I'm gonna make a stack. Okay. Then we're gonna push it to the GitHub, and then I'll show you how to make pipeline. Okay. So just gonna make a new folder. So what I'm gonna show you now right now is that I'm gonna put my code in a separate stack, and then I'm gonna make a pipeline in a separate stack. You can keep them in the same stack as well. It doesn't really make a difference, but just to keep the thing simple, I'm gonna put them in different stacks. Okay. So so I'm going to create my like the backend code, this thing over here that I'm expecting to change again and again, and then I want it to build and deploy automatically. Okay, so this is what I'm creating right now. So I'm just going to put one DynamoDB table in it. It can have like thousands of lines of code, like your entire backend code, but I'm just going to, just to keep things simple, I'm just going to put one DynamoDB table in it. It's taking a while. So I can set up my stack. So I'm just going to put one DynamoDB table. Oh,
Varesh, you will have to increase the font here also.
Yeah. Oh, okay, sure.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so I think there was a problem with my network. It's trying again. Okay. Okay, that's done. Okay. Let me just change the billing mode. Okay. So this is like you can assume that this is our backend code. Now I'm gonna push it to a repository. So we have made our code. I'm gonna push it to the repository, but nothing would happen right now because we have not implemented our pipeline. Okay. But just quickly push it. Okay. So we have made our repository. Now we have our CDK stack that we have not deployed yet, but it's sitting in our GitHub repository. Okay. But this thing wouldn't run right now because we have not made this. Now let's make this thing in a new stack. Okay. Now, okay. I've already written the code for this thing. I'll explain you line by line. Okay. So first of all, let's just comment this out. Okay. So now we're making our pipeline. Okay, we have written our stack, we have pushed it to the GitHub. Now we're making our pipeline that will automate these two commands, the build and deployment commands. Okay. So the first thing you need to do is you need to import this code pipeline from this library. Okay. And then you will have to initialize your pipeline. Okay, this is very simple. Like you initialize every other service. First of all, you write your scope, that is this, then the name that you want to give to the service, to this resource. This can be anything, and then some parameters. Now, both these parameters are completely optional, I believe. So the first one is saying that we want to create cross-account keys that would allow you to use this pipeline in multiple accounts. So if you put it to true, you will actually get charged for like $1 per month. So just leave it false. And then the second parameter is that do you want to rerun your pipeline every time you update it? You have left it true. I think both of them are optional. Okay. But here we have initialized our pipeline. Okay. Now, what we do with the pipeline? In the pipeline, you always add stages. Okay. And typically there are three main stages. Okay. So you can see over here, there are basically typically three main stages in the pipeline. They can be more or less, but typically there are three main stages. Okay. The first stage is to fetch the code. Okay. So this pipeline in the first stage, it will fetch the code from the GitHub repository. Okay. So the first stage is to fetch the code. The second stage is to build that code. Okay. And the third stage is to deploy that code. Okay. So there are typically there are three main stages. Okay. In the first stage, we will go to the GitHub repository that we just made. We will fetch that code. We will pass it on to the next stage that will build that code. And after building, we will deploy that code in the third stage. Okay. So if I go back to my account, go back to my code, you can see we have actually added first stage to this pipeline that we initialized. Okay. To add a stage, all you have to do is use this function .add stage, and then in the stage name you have to write the name of the stage. So our first stage is the fetching the data from the repository. Okay, that we will build. So you can name it anything. I have written source over here. Okay, and then in the actions you can see we have initialized new object, and then we're using GitHub source action function. Okay, why are we using GitHub source action function? Because my repository lies in GitHub. Now you can also use GitLab source action function or code commit source action functions. There are different functions for different sources. You can go through the documentation and find them. But right now we're using GitHub, so we're going to use GitHub source action. Okay, this means that our repository is coming from GitHub. Okay. Next thing is the name of the action. Now again, this can be anything. This is just a name. Okay, I've written checkout. Now this is very important. Owner, who is the owner of the repository, from where you want to fetch the data, like who made it. Now if I can go back to, you can see my username is Varis, and I made that account. I made that repository. See, this is the repository. Okay, so I will write my name over here. So you will probably write your username over GitHub username over here. Okay, and then it's asking for the name of the repository, like from where do you want to fetch the data. Where do you want to fetch the data that I will build later and deploy later. Okay, so I have just made my repo with the name CDK backend. Okay, so I'm just going to copy paste this over here. So owner of the repo and the name of the repo. Okay, and what is in this repo? In this repo, this is the code. Assume that this is our backend code, and right now we just have one DynamoDB in it, and it's not deployed yet. Okay, it's just sitting in the repository. Okay. Now the next thing is that it asks for an OAuth token. Now this is a token that is provided by GitHub, and that actually allows you to identify that if you're to validate your account and identify that if this repo does belong to you, like you are the owner of this repo. So all the verification and validation is done using this GitHub coin, GitHub token. Let me show you how to create that. So if you go to our repository, in step 2, you'll find the link over here. Just click over here. And this is how you create a token. So you will have to generate new token. Now, without this token, the AWS would not have access to your account. Okay. So this is just a node, test token. And then these are the permission scopes or permission that what do you want to permit in this token. So I'm just gonna give permission of everything right now. This means that the person who the service or whoever is using this token would have access to all this stuff. And generate a token. Okay. So this is the token. Okay.
I guess you have given everything, but not the repo.
Oh, okay. Should I delete it? Make it
Actually, repo is required.
Okay. Let me create this again. Repo. Just giving all the permissions so that we don't get any errors later. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we have got our token. I copy this token. Now you can see right now I've copied the code from our repo. In our repo, we are actually importing the token from the secrets manager that we learned last week. Okay. So you can either do that. For that, I will have to make a secret manager. But for now, I'm just going to use plain text. Let's see if there's a method. Yeah. Going to add my token over here. But I think the ideal way is to use a secret manager because this should not be exposed, right? Okay. Now the next thing is very important: output. Now this can be a bit confusing. Now right now we're saying that okay, we are fetching the data from the repository. But we need to pass that data to the next stage. And how would we do that? We would pass it through a temporary storage, which is called artifact. So you can see I have made an artifact over here in this variable. And the output, I'm saying the output of this stage would be stored in this artifact. Okay. So let me repeat this. Artifact is nothing but just a temporary storage that is used to transfer data between different stages of the pipeline. Okay. So what this stage is doing is that it is validating your account, it repo everything, and then it is fetching the code from your repo and then storing it in this artifact. And why is it storing it? So that the next step, you can see in the next step input is the same artifact. So that the next stage, that is the build stage, can use this artifact as an input, okay? Because it needs to build this code, right? So let me just repeat it again. People get confused with this name artifact. Artifact is nothing but just a temporary storage that you use in pipelines to transfer data from one stage to another. Okay. So in this case, my 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 first stage is fetching the data from the repo. Like,
Varis, did you create two artifacts?
yeah. I'm going to come to the second one later. Okay. I'm only talking about this one right now.
Okay.
Because we have 3 stages, we need to pass the data to the third stage as well. That's why we need 2 artifacts. This would be used by the second stage. Okay. So yeah. So basically, it takes all this code, puts it into the artifact, and it's passing it on to the next stage. Okay, the build stage, because build stage needs something to build, right? Okay. So that's it. That's it for this stage, and we have also defined a branch over here that's we're using master branch. So that's it. The source stage is quite easy to understand. Okay. Now the second stage is the build stage. Now we have got the code. What do we need to do with it? We need to build it. Okay. Again, we will use the add stage function. The stage name, you've written it build. You can write anything you want to, and then in the action you can see we've used a different function over here. We are using code build action now because we want to build the code, right? Now in the input, we're using the same artifact that was outputted by the last stage. Okay, you can see over here. It's an artifact that was outputted by this stage. It is being taken as an input by this stage. Okay. Now it has the code. It has the code now that needs to build, right? Then we've defined our action name. Now this can be anything. Now this is very important, the project. So in here, we define that how are we going to build our code? Like what commands do we need to use? What build commands do we need to use? Because different projects can have different build commands, right? And we have defined them in this variable, and I actually commented it out. Just uncommented. Okay, so you can see this variable is this over here. And what we're doing in this variable is that we are creating a build spec file. Okay, so build spec file has all the details about your build commands. Okay, now you can, if you don't want to write the build spec file over here, you can also create a build spec file manually and put it over here in the root folder of your repository, and the pipeline would automatically detect it. And in that case, you would actually have to change some parameters over here. I think you would have to remove this, but I think it's best to define it over here so that we can change it whenever we want to. Okay, so you can see in the build spec file where I'm saying over here, I'm creating it from object. So we are defining a JSON object. So first of all, I'm writing my install command, and the environment is Node.js. Okay, and then I'm running my build command. Okay, npm run build that we usually do. But you can see we have also run another command, and this command is cd-synth. Now I don't remember if I don't know if most of you remember this command or not, but I think we discussed this in the beginning of this repo. So actually, yep. Okay. So basically, when you run CDK deploy manually, what happens is that it creates a CloudFormation file locally. Okay, locally on your computer. First, it creates a CloudFormation file with this name. Okay, your stack name .template.json. Okay, and then it uploads it to the AWS cloud. Okay, this is what CDK deploy does. This is what is happening behind the scenes. Okay, but if you write CDK synth only, then it only creates this this file locally, but it does not deploy it. Okay, so this is the difference between the two commands. Now, why are we running this command over here in the build stage? Because our next stage, that is the deploy stage, it expects us to give it a CloudFormation file. Okay, our deployment stage, that is the last stage, it expects us to give it a CloudFormation file. That's why you need to create a CloudFormation file in this stage, in the build stage. And this command actually allows you to create a CloudFormation file and locally, and it does not deploy it. Okay, if you run CDK deploy, then it creates the file and deploys it. Okay. So here what we're saying over here is that we want to create a new folder called dist, and then we want to save that CloudFormation file in that folder. Okay. So when you will run this command, it will create a new folder called dist, and it will save that CloudFormation template in that folder. Okay. Okay. Now you can see we also have an output artifact over here. That's the second artifact. That's what I was asking about. Now we have made this artifact so that we can pass this data to the next stage, that is deployment stage. Okay. But what will go in this artifact? We also need to define that in the build spec file. Okay. So what will go in the output artifact? We have defined it over here. We only want to store the CloudFormation file that is in this folder in the artifact. Okay. So what we're saying in the artifact is that go to the distribution folder and you will find a file with this name and save it in the output artifact. This means that the data that would be passed on to the next stage would only have the CloudFormation file. Okay. And how do we and what is the stack name? I've just created a variable over here that saves the stack name of our this stack. Let me change now. Let me just change the stack name. And why are we putting the stack name of that of that stack? Because that is the stack that we're building, right? Right now, this stack would not be available in the CloudFormation because we have not deployed it yet. But once we deploy it, the name is going to remain the same. It's going to get deployed with this name, okay? And the CloudFormation template file that gets created with this format, like the stack name .template.json. Okay.
So Varis, basically artifacts is nothing but a storage place, like you are copying in a USB, like a USB file. You are you have basically saying I'm entering the USB. Please copy this file to this USB.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. Okay. And so let me repeat this again. I've just defined over here that what would go in the output artifact. So we created our cloud template file over here in the dist folder. So we are saying open the dist folder. You'll find out cloud template file. Save that in the artifact, and that is what is saved in the output artifact. Okay. And this output now this stage is done. Build is done. It will run all the commands. It will build. It will generate a cloud formation file for us, and it will store in the artifact. I've also actually made a diagram over here. You can see this is the flow. The first stage fetches the code from GitHub. Then it stores its output in the artifact. That artifact gets passed on to the next stage. Then the next stage saves its output in the artifact. It will get passed on to the next stage, and then the last stage is the deployment stage. So it will deploy the code. Okay. So now we're done with the first two stages. Now you can see in the deploy stage there is no input, but it asks for a template path. Okay. And template path is basically it's asking for a cloud template file. Okay. That's why we ran CDK synth over there, because it asks for a cloud template file that it needs to deploy. Okay. So initially we just written the name. That's it. Here we are using create update stack action. Okay. So we want to create a stack now. Okay. We are deploying it. We need to create a stack now. This is the action name, and in the template path we have our artifact that we got from the last stage. And this has the cloud template, template file. And so we are saying that in this artifact, find this file and deploy it. Okay. So this is just a variable that I defined over here, and this has the stack name of our stack that we are building. That is sitting in the repository. Okay. And then it's asking that where do you want to deploy it? Like in which stack do you want to deploy this file? Okay. Now this again is going to be our stack name, because the stack that we're going to create from that when we are going to deploy this stack, it's going to create it with this name. It's going to be created with this name, right? So if there's no stack with this name, then it's going to create a stack. But if there's a stack available with this name, then it's going to update that stack with this file. Okay. This is your CloudFormation file that you got from the last stage. Okay. And these are just permissions. We're just giving permissions to we're just giving all the permissions so that we don't get any errors. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Now I will deploy. Now you can actually copy and paste all this code in the same stack as well. It doesn't really matter. I've just done it in different stacks just to keep things simple. But you can have all this code in just one stack. Okay.
What was the last stage? I didn't get it.
the last stage is the deployment stage. So should I explain it again?
Yes, please.
Okay. So from the build stage, in the build stage, we ran all these commands. We installed our dependencies. We ran npm run build, and then we also created our CloudFormation template file. Why? Because our next stage expects us to pass it to it. Okay. And then we said, okay, we have got our CloudFormation template file. Now in the output artifact of this build stage, of the second stage, we want to store this file only, the CloudFormation file. Go into this folder and find that file and store it in the artifact. Okay. Okay. So this means that the output artifact would only have the CloudFormation file. You can store whatever you want to, like you can define it over here. But in this case, we only want to pass the CloudFormation template file to the next stage. So that's why we're only storing that file. Okay. So this gets saved here. This stage ends. Now the next stage is the deployment stage. Now this stage would do nothing but just deploy that CloudFormation file in the CloudFormation service. That's it. Okay. So here it is asking for the CloudFormation file template. Give me that template that you generated in the last stage. Okay. So here we are saying is that it's in the in this artifact at this path with this name. So just pick it up and deploy it. Okay. That's all this step is doing. Okay. And then it is asking that in which stack should I deploy it? Okay. Like, so the stack name remains same, whatever you give over here. So right now I've given my stack name is CDK backend stack. So that's why I've written so I've actually passed this over here in the variable, and I'm passing that variable over here. So right now it would not, we have not deployed our code. We have not deployed this code. So it would not be available in the CloudFormation. So the first time we will run this pipeline, it will create that stack with the stack name. And the next time we will run this pipeline, it will only update that stack because there would be a stack available with this name. Okay. So that's it. So it's only just deploying the CloudFormation template that we passed it on to from the last stage. Okay. So let me just revise it very quickly. So we have 3 stages. Source stage that fetches the code from the GitHub repository. It then passes that code to the build stage. Build stage runs the build spec file in which we generate the CloudFormation template. That template gets stored in the artifact. It gets passed on to the deployment stage, and the deployment stage just deploys that CloudFormation template to the CloudFormation service in AWS, and that's it. And this is what you normally do when you run CDK deploy. Okay, you generate a CloudFormation template and you deploy it in the CloudFormation service in AWS. Okay. It is kind of confusing because half of the stuff is being done in the build stage, and the second half is being done in the deployment stage. Okay, that's why I think it's a bit confusing. So save it. Let's deploy this.
Varis, we have not connected GitHub. How will it know, AWS know that something happened at GitHub? A push was made, a commit was.
Sir, we actually connect the GitHub repo and user ID, the access token.
I guess while it's hanged out, or maybe its screen is stuck.
Zeeshan, please give him a call and tell him to.
Sure, just a moment. He's joining in a minute. So actually, at the very first stage, he had 3 stages for the deployment. First one was the source, Second one was the build, and one was the deployment. So the first one, the source stage, at that stage, Varis has connected it with the GitHub. So it mentioned the repo name, it mentioned the repo owner, it mentioned the GitHub token. So that stage works for the deployment. Let me open up our repository, and once meanwhile he's joining. So basically, to summarize, once he's joined, Varis will continue, and I guess he's here. Okay, I guess Varis is here. Varis, please share your screen.
Okay, yeah. Where did I get disconnected? Like I didn't know.
Once you explain the last part of deployment to on Sarzia's question.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly revise it again. Let me first deploy it. Okay, so our pipeline is getting deployed. So let me just quickly revise it, all these stages. So our first stage is the source stage that takes that fetches data from our GitHub repository that we defined in there, and then it passes that data through an artifact to that build stage. The build stage runs all these commands, all these commands in the build spec file, and in this case, it generates a CloudFormation template file that gets saved in the artifact, and it gets passed to the deployment stage. The deployment stage deploys this CloudFormation template to the CloudFormation service. That's it. Now, I think the reason it's getting confusing is because half of this, what is done using CDK deploy, half of that step is done using the build stage, and the rest half is done using the deploy stage. That's why it's getting confusing. So this step over here is being done in the build stage, and this step over here is being done in the deploy stage. Okay. So I have now deployed my. So my pipeline is getting deployed. Let me open it up from here. So be mindful that our this stack has not been deployed yet. Now, when our pipeline will run, it will fetch the code from this repository. It will build it, and then it will deploy it. Then our stack would be deployed. This stack would be deployed. That has just one DynamoDB in it. Okay. Okay, so it's done. Let me show you guys. So you can see we have one pipeline that is in progress. So when you deploy it first time, it starts running by itself. Okay. So you can see all these stages over here. Our first stage was the source stage. It says it succeeded. Now the second stage is the build stage. It is building our code right now. You can also see details over here, the logs. So you can see it's building our code, the code from this repository. Okay. Now we do not have a table right now with this name, but once our code has been deployed by the pipeline, you would see a table over here. It's deploying. So see, this is where it created the CloudFormation template. Okay. I think it has succeeded. Now the third, now it's deploying my code, deploying my backend stack. This is the third stage.
Varis, how did it know that you had done a commit on GitHub?
I've not done a commit on GitHub. It runs automatically the first time you deploy it. Now it will
Okay.
only run when I'm doing a commit. Yeah.
But how will it know?
Because I've connected my GitHub repository with it in the.
This is services provided by AWS.
Yeah. So if you like use this function over here, then it will always start after. It will always rerun after you commit in your repo. In this repo that you mentioned over here. Yeah. But you can also run these pipelines from different events that we will learn in the next class in the event bridge. Yeah. So you can see we have got the table over here. Should be done. You can see it's creating a CloudFormation stack. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to update this this file over here. Then I'm going to push some. I'm going to push it to the repository, and then it should trigger again. The pipeline should run again. Okay. Okay, I think it's done. Oh. Okay, you can see all these stages have been succeeded. Now if your build had failed, it would say fail over here, and then it would stop. Okay. So our stack has been deployed. This is our stack, and you can see a DynamoDB table has been formed. This is the table. Okay. Now let's create another table. Table 2. Okay. Now let's push this code. Now you can see it should have started again. You can see it has started again. You can see it's in progress. Now it's gonna fetch my repository again. It's gonna build it again, and it's gonna deploy it again. And once it has been deployed, we're gonna see 2 DynamoDB tables over here. Okay. So this is how you implement CI/CD on your backend code, the CDK stack. I'm just gonna cancel it now because it's like too expensive. Okay, I think I'll just wait. So now the next thing that we need to see is how can we implement CI/CD on the on our client side. Okay. For that, I'm gonna make a new Gatsby project. Okay, so it's almost done. It has been built successfully. Now it's deploying. You must have, you can see we have created another table over here. Okay. So now whenever you will change anything in this stack, it will be reflected on your console because it will get deployed automatically by CI/CD, by pipeline. Okay.
Basically, Varis, except for the token which we got from GitHub,
Yeah.
doesn't know anything.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Everything is done by pipelines.
Yeah.
Pipeline.
Yep. And if you use their own code commit version control system, then I think it's even easier. You don't even have to provide the token. Yeah. Yeah. So that's it for the backend. Now let me show you how to do it on the client side.
This is the reason build is costly as well, because they are, I guess they are listening constantly to the repository for the commits.
Yeah.
I think most probably they have implemented it with a webhook or something in a
Yes.
collaboration with GitHub.
Maybe, yes. But this one token will work for all repository.
So I've initialized a new Gatsby project, and I'm pushing it to the GitHub. Okay. So we're again going to implement this thing, but now this time we're not going to deploy to the CloudFormation. We're going to deploy to the S3 bucket. Why? Because we're now seeing how to implement CI/CD on the client side. Okay. So first of all, now this time it's going to be my client side application. So I've created it using Gatsby Hello World. Now I'm pushing it to the GitHub. Okay. So publish repository. Okay. Now I've already written the code for the front end pipeline as well. Now it's very, very, very similar. There are not much differences, but let me show you. Now the first thing that you need to do is that you need to write the deployment code, the front end deployment code that we saw. Yep. I've just copy pasted this code because whenever you have to deploy your front end website, first you need to create a bucket, then you need to create a distribution, and then you need to define what you need to put in that bucket. Okay, so this is the standard whenever you want to deploy your front end website. So the first thing in the stack that I'm going to write is this. I've created a bucket, then I've created a distribution, and then I'm telling that what would go in my bucket, like what do I want to deploy. Okay, so right now I'm giving giving the path of my public folder. Okay, so when I'm going to deploy this manually, it's gonna deploy whatever is in my public folder to that bucket. But through the pipeline, we can also do this as whenever we push something on our client on our client side repository, then the bucket would then the code from that repository would get published onto the bucket. Okay, so let me just confirm the. I'm just creating a build folder so that we don't get any error when we first deploy it. Because the first time when we're going to deploy it with this pipeline, first time we'll have to deploy it manually. So it's going to look for this folder. So that's why I'm creating it. Okay. Then this is the folder. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I don't think I need to explain this code because we've been through this. We've been through it. Okay. This is just basic deployment code. Okay. Now the thing is that we need to update this bucket whenever we change our code in the repository. So whenever we change anything in this in this front end project, we need to update this bucket with it. Okay. So this is the whole idea of pipeline. So now we are going to create our pipeline, which is extremely very similar to what we did in the backend. So let's start from here. Just like before, we're initializing our pipeline over here. We get the same, exactly everything is exactly the same. Okay. And then again, we will add stages. The first stage is to fetch the repository. Okay. And it's exactly the same as we did in the backend. It's exactly the same. All I would have to do is add my secret over here and the name of the repo. Repo stage. Oh, copy the secret from my other code. Oh. So this is exactly the same. The first stage is exactly the same. Now the second stage is also the same. There's no difference. So we are giving the output from the first stage to an artifact. Where's the artifact? This artifact that is going as an input to the next stage, the build stage. Yeah, but the only difference would be in the build spec file, okay, that we have defined over here. Now, obviously, now we are building our front end project. The build commands would be different, right? So first of all, we have defined our install environment. Then you can see the install command are different as well. First, we need to install the Gatsby, and then we run npm install, okay. And then in the build command, we're writing a Gatsby build, right? When we were deploying backend, we wrote CDK npm run build and CDK synth, okay. So this time, all we need to do is we need to create a public folder that would get deployed in this bucket, okay. So we are only writing Gatsby build, and then what is going to be in the artifact, in the output artifact of this build stage? We are saying everything that is in the public folder, all files go into the artifact, okay. So this means that this artifact, the output artifact of the build stage, would have all the files that are in the public folder, that are the build files, okay. And these build files are passed on to the deploy stage. Now, deploy stage would be different. Why? Because when we were deploying our backend, we were deploying a stack. Now, this time we're not deploying a stack. We're only updating our bucket, right? This bucket. Okay. So that's why you can see even the function has changed. If I compare it from these backend code, you can see here we use CloudFormation, create stack. Here we wanted to create a stack, but this time we only want to deploy in S3. Okay. So you can see. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Okay. So this time we're using we only want to deploy in the S3 bucket. Okay. So in the input, we want all the build files, the public folder, right? And where was that? That was in the artifact that we outputted from the build stage. Okay. Here we said that in the artifact we want all the files that are in the public folder. Okay. Go into the public folder and take all the files and put them in the output artifact of the build stage, and we are taking that artifact as an input in the deploy stage. Okay. Now, in which bucket do you want to update this? In which bucket do you want to deploy this code? And we're referencing our bucket that we made above over here. Okay. And that's it. The code is very similar to backend. Now, first, let's deploy this. Now, right now, it should only, wait, oh shit, I did not save the file. Yeah, so initially, right now, when it will deploy this code, we would only see hello world, like the default text that you see on the Gatsby project in our website, okay? Because right now, as we are deploying this stack, we're also deploying our website. But then whenever we're going to change something in our website and commit it, then our pipeline is going to run again, and it's going to make the changes on our CDN or our bucket, okay? It may take a few minutes because it takes a bit of time to create this distribution, CloudFront distribution. And you can actually find this code from in our repository. So what I've discussed up till now is step 2 and step 3. Step 1 is just like basic setup of pipeline. So this is the back end and this is the front end, okay? So you can see it's already in process, in progress.
Anything else to teach today?
Sorry?
Anything else left to teach today?
No, I think I'm just going to show this and then we're going to be done. Do we have enough time?
We have time.
Okay. Then I'm also going to discuss that how can you run both of them together, like the front end and back end.
Okay.
But I think that's the topic for the next class because you can do that using events. And we're going to learn events in the next class. Yeah.
Okay. And Huma, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to revise the whole thing? What Baris has taught today?
Sure, sir. So to begin with, Code Pipeline is AWS service which actually provides us the opportunity to orchestrate the entire workflow of CI/CD. We can use few AWS services which we actually call construct in CDK to automate the entire process. It all begins with triggers. Now, triggers is like services are actually being monitored just like my.
Huma, your video is off, I think.
Do I need to on it because it actually gets stuck?
Okay, then leave it as it is.
So the entire process of Code Pipeline actually triggers. It's actually work on triggers. So we have one main trigger which is like source code. Once there is a change in source code, our Code Pipeline is started. There are other triggers as well, like we can start the Code Pipeline manually, we can schedule it, or we can use CloudWatch event or event bridge, which we cover in next class, hopefully. Code Pipeline is composed of stages, just like Varis used 3 stages: source code, build, and deploy. Inside each stage, you can define actions. And as far as I know, there are 6 type of actions. You can either use source, build, deploy. Though build and test are individual, but they actually comprise as a one in code build. And then you can also have approval as a manual step and then invoke. And again, the major part was artifact. Artifact are simply input and output of each stages, because usually stages are in a hierarchical order. Output for one would be the input for the next one. So that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Very good. This is your first day, but you did a marvelous job. Zeeshan, anything to add?
I just wanted to add one thing, that do not confuse with the CDK stack with the CI/CD pipeline. Basically, the thing we learned today in our first step, Varis has clearly mentioned that there are two ways. One, if we are trying to deploy our backend, which is already on CDK stack, and another is we are deploying our web front end application. So any your application, any of your application, you wanted to deploy it with the automated deployment CI/CD pipeline, so that you just push your code to your repository, and then a CI/CD service pick that code, build that code, and deployed it. For that, we use CI/CD pipeline, and this is the service of AWS. What we were trying to do today is, in what we have learned in our previous classes, that we build our stack with CDK, so that once we run our code as we have learned it, it is an infrastructure as a code. So infrastructure as a code, basically we want to set up our infrastructure as a code. That's why we are learning CDK. So what we have learned today is we have set up an infrastructure for our backend. Let's say the Varis did for a DynamoDB table. So we set up our infrastructure which creates the DynamoDB table, and it does something. On the other hand, what Varis did is created another stack which actually deploying this stack. So we are creating CI/CD pipeline in CDK. So we are actually using CDK to deploy CDK stack to deploy CDK stack in this case. So the CDK step we have created in another stack, and we have mentioned that you want to deploy this stack, and we have identified the repository, that you pick that repository, build it, and deploy it. So that's why it was, and Varis has constantly identifying you that it is only confusing because we are doing everything related to the CI/CD and with the stack together. So that's why you need to understand that any service, any web you want to deploy, you can do it. You will not just do the deployment of CDK stack. You can deploy any of your uh, uh, server side application, whether it is in with the uh, CDK or not CDK. You can do that. So we will use CI/CD to deploy our application, and for to deploy we can use any repository which can be built and deployed. That's why this is the circle for you to understand clearly.
Varis, anything you want to add? Anything?
Yeah, sure. So right now when I deployed this stack, it deployed the default application Hello World. Now I've made some changes in it. I've written Hello World from Varis, and I've pushed my code to the GitHub. So now it's building again. It has triggered a pipeline again, and let's just wait for a few minutes, and it's gonna update our application as well. Okay. And yeah. Now, if you actually want to combine them together, the front end and back end, I would not recommend you to do that. But if you want to do that, you can actually have more than 3 steps in your pipeline. You can actually first you can actually have 6 steps, like first source for the backend, then build backend, then deploy backend, then same for the front end. I've not done that, but I'm not sure if it works or not. You can do that because you can have more than 3 steps. But I think the better way is to use events, like at the completion of backend pipeline, you can actually trigger the front end pipeline. Okay, I think that's the better way to keep both the pipelines separate, and then trigger one after another using events. And we will learn that tomorrow. Yeah.
In the next class.
Yeah, in the next class. Sorry. So it's running Gatsby build now. Okay, so see that. Okay, it's done now. Our website should have been updated. Oh, it didn't update.
I think it's still in process.
Oh, I think it is done.
Okay, I think must have missed something.
Yeah.
The entire code is there, and everybody can review it. I think we should take a leave. Students are already tired. Most of them, most of them have never done more than 1 hour of study. Okay. Bye bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye everyone. Bye everyone.
Bye bye.